Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sasquatch Theory. Deep in the swamps and river bottoms along the Louisiana-Texas border, strange screams have echoed through the woods for generations. Locals didn't call it Bigfoot necessarily, they called it the hairy man, the wild man. In this episode, I talk with Lynn, a lifelong hunter and trapper who isn't here to speculate, he's here to share what he's seen with his own eyes and what he's heard in those woods since the early 1970s. Lynn doesn't believe these creatures are a cuddly little bunny, and he warns people to be careful when they are confronted by the Sasquatch. If you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me here on Sasquatch Theory, feel free to get in touch with me sometime at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Help support the channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And with all that being said, let's dive straight into our next Bigfoot report from the state of Louisiana. Lynn, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, Miguel. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for asking. Lynn, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters and experiences, and all the knowledge you have regarding them from the very beginning, okay?
My name is Lynn. I'm 66 years old. I'm a native of Louisiana, along the Louisiana-Texas border. I come from a family that lived as far back as I know, at least before the Civil War, in the Sabine River bottoms along the Louisiana-Texas border on the Louisiana side. It was a family that spent their lives so far back in the woods as my mother used to describe. You had the plump sunshine. They had been seeing these creatures that they referred to as the wild man for 100 years or more down in those river bottoms. It wasn't a thing of myth or legend. Something most everybody down that way at one time or another had seen or heard. Growing up in the 60s, I remember at my grandparents' house, which was basically 6 miles off the closest two-lane blacktop into the woods, with another 45 miles of river bottom behind them. I can remember late night screams and howls that you would hear sometimes echoing out of those river bottoms. The adults knew what they were, what was causing them. People back then, they didn't talk a whole lot about them. I was told, as far back as I could remember, that the wild man, that was the wild man making those sounds, not to worry about them. They'll be way back down there in the river bottoms. They won't come up here and bother you. In this area, where I live now is further north, but still along the Texas-Louisiana border. I'm 56 miles south of South Arkansas, Texarkana. There are a lot of people in this area who have known about these things and actually have seen them. We have some fairly notable researchers in this area. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a Bigfoot fanboy or enthusiast. I'm a hunter and tracker, old school. I've hunted these woods. I've hunted woods from southern Missouri down to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas, and Louisiana borders all my life. I come from an old school family of woodsmen. I never had a BB gun. I was given my first firearm, 1928 single shot Springfield 22 rifle, when I was 6 or 7 years old. By 8 or 9 years old, I was in the woods, Sabine River bottoms, squirrel hunting by myself. I probably started camping in the woods by myself around 10 years old. The biggest passion outside my career has been hunting, fishing, the wilderness. I've spent probably 1,000 nights, at least in my lifetime, in the woods. The first encounter I visually had with these creatures was on a creek bank. They were on the opposite side of the creek bank. It was 1972, just after school was out at the end of May. And literally, I thought actually that they were big monkeys. One of them, from my perspective, from where I was at, appeared to be maybe 4 foot tall. The other one maybe a little bit taller. But I saw them for 2 or 3 minutes on the other side. And I literally thought they were monkeys until I voiced the experience to my mother, and my mother told me that there were no monkeys in Louisiana, and what I had seen was a wild man, and basically told me to keep my little butt out of those creek bottoms. Up until that time, even though I'd been told about the wild man, the only perception or visual perception that I had of something that might be a wild man was what I'd seen on TV, something like Tarzan, maybe a feral human. I was thinking something more like actual human life, not some big monkey. But anyway, after that, I don't know, it's probably a couple of years later. Probably 20, maybe 20 miles south of that same area. I had a brief encounter, something bipedal, tall, and very large. In my entire life in the outdoors, I've only seen one thing that would match that description. That is these creatures. Over the years, I've seen them. I can't even tell you exactly how many times. Most of the sightings, if you want to call them that, I've had have been just very fleeting glimpses of something moving in the brush. Some of them been a little bit better views. What I do know about these things, they can stand still for a very, very long time. They seem to be very aware or sensitive to how much light is surrounding in the daytime. It's almost like they can tell the depth of shadow that they're in. And I can guarantee you that there are hunters every year that if they don't smell these things, which you don't always smell them. They probably every year there's probably many hunters that walk within yards of these things and don't know it. Because unless they move, you're not going to see them. Humans, when they go in the woods, they're looking for something specific. In this part of the world, they're generally just looking for their particular prey during that season, whatever it may be, and snakes. Outside of that, they're pretty much oblivious to anything else. That aids in the ability of these things to remain concealed. My encounters with them weren't the result of a search for them. I encountered them simply for the fact that I was looking for the same thing they were. I was tracking deer and sometimes hogs, mostly deer, and these things feed largely on large mammals, deer and hogs. Back in the 70s, I bounty hunted coyotes for the Cattlemen's Association because they were losing a lot of livestock on what they blamed on coyotes. But I believe the coyotes followed these things. I've come across some pretty mutilated deer and hogs in my lifetime where the entrails were pretty much gone, but there was a whole lot of flesh still there. Most of the time that I've come across them, it was after the coyotes had gotten there. A few times it's been before they gotten there. Though, like on one occasion, I could hear them coming. Coyotes and these things are kind of interrelated, like deer and hogs are with them. Because there was a time in my life, a few years in my life, where I pursued coyotes, and which is mostly a night hunt. And having a lot of hunters, they'll go out and look for deer sign and stuff right before deer season. Back when before age started to prohibit the amount of time that I could spend in the woods, I tracked deer movements in the areas I hunted year round. I never hunted from a stand. I was a ground hunter. By opening day, I not only generally knew where I was going to be hunting that day, but most of the time I knew the specific deer that I was going to be targeting because I'd been watching for months. That's been the nature of why I have seen them. Like I said, they weren't a mystery to me. The only mystery that I had was when I realized exactly what they were. Back when I was a boy. But I've been told about the wild man ever since John Kennedy was the president of the United States. So you know how long that's been. But they're out there. I don't know. I hear a lot of people talking about different aspects of them that I personally have no experience with. What I have encountered in my life was living, breathing creatures. What they are, I couldn't tell you. They have similarities to humans, some similarities to primates, but anatomically, muscularly, and skeletally, and I don't think they're either one. They are very, of course, they vary like humans do in appearance. I've seen over the years, but these things are muscular. From behind, their shoulder muscles just seem to be connected to the top of the head. I've seen various shades of hair and various amounts of hair covering on these creatures. They have a facial feature. Facial feature is humanoid, I would say that, at least from the brow down. Large heads, long arms, large hands. Uh, they have broad, somewhat flattened noses for the most part, but downturned nostrils. They're not forward-facing nostrils. Large mouths. I've never seen anything that well, nothing as far as fangs or tusks or anything like that. Of course, like I said, most of the time you see these things, it's just fleeting glimpses. But they seem to walk somewhat bent-kneed, and they seem to have, it's hard to describe this, but kind of elongated pelvises. And when they walk, it's kind of like their pelvic area twists forward in the direction of their travel. It's kind of hard to describe. But I do know this: even at a full gait, they can transition between bipedal and quadrupedal locomotion and vice versa. They can go down on all fours or come up off all fours at gait, and it don't take them but a second to disappear. I hear a lot of people talk about them vanishing. I've never seen anything really bizarre like that, but I do know this, and this is something prevalent when you're stalking a lot of game in the real dense woods, like is in this part of the country. Uh, there are areas along the Texas-Louisiana border and Arkansas and border that at high noon are as dark as dusk. But a lot of times you can watch a creature run off, regardless of what you're tracking. It's a dark colored animal, and it's running into the brush, even though you have some visual on them, even though they're running through some foliage and stuff. The further they run into the woods, if you're standing in an area that's more illuminated and you're looking into the brush, the further in that brush you go, the darker it gets. And a dark colored creature moving into that uh, less illuminated forest reaches at some point, according to how dark they themselves are, they reach they reach a vanishing point per se when they are far enough into the brush that they are as dark as the background and they just seem to disappear. That may be a phenomenon that people are observing. I don't, there are a lot of researchers in my area. I don't go out looking for these things. And all the times I've been in the woods, I really hope I didn't run across any sign of these things because nothing will ruin a good hunt like the presence of these creatures. Because if they're bedded down in an area, they're going to be the only wildlife in the area. So, um, what I can say about these things, and in the course of my lifetime, I've witnessed the rapid expansion of suburbia. In my local area, a lot of the woods, and probably even the woods that I first saw these things in, are now within a city limits. Suburbia is gobbled up thousands upon thousands of acres of wood. The city and the area I'm in, you used to never even see a squirrel hardly. Now you've got squirrel, deer, hogs, raccoons, possums, armadillos, and every other manner of wildlife, all in suburban areas. Because the suburbia has displaced the woods, well, those creatures didn't simply cease to exist. They just got pushed into more and more of a confined area and became more and more accustomed to human presence. And I don't believe these creatures are any different. I have found sign of these creatures literally as a crow flies, probably less than 3 miles from a Walmart supercenter. I think I think there are more of these creatures than most people believe, and I think they are a lot closer in a lot of areas than you would think. They're just very, very good at staying concealed. Um, the thing I'm concerned sometimes, not only about these creatures, but about other forms of wildlife, because I have warned a lot of neighbors and stuff about dangers that exist just beyond their fence, especially when it comes to their children and stuff. As a matter of fact, I pointed out things like bobcats and coyotes. I mean, literally feet behind fenced in backyards to people in the area. People, especially people in the suburbs, don't realize that a lot of places they live now, only decades earlier, were the middle of the wilderness. Um, uh, I don't know much more specifically to add to it. Do you have any questions, Miguel?
Not right now. I mean, if you want to keep flowing through it, I think you're doing excellent.
Well, these creatures, like all other wildlife, are never going to be far from three things: food source, water source, and habitat cover. Anywhere you have a year-round continuous water source and adequate wildlife, you will find all manner of predators. Um, I hear a lot about. I hear people talking about wood knocks. I've heard those all my life. Growing up in the woods, trees themselves sometimes make loud pops and groans, but there are other. When you hear something that sounds like a Louisville slugger slam the side of a tree, I think that these creatures use those knocks to locate one another, to know the position of one another. That's just a theory, but that's the best one that I've had in my life. I can't see any other reason why they do that. I know that people, I've heard people talk about orbs and things of that nature. Those type of things, lights in the woods, has been something that's always existed. And I've seen them, everybody else that I know. Some of that, given part of my professional career and education, is based in the field of chemical engineering and petrochemical engineering. Some of these things are naturally occurring phenomena. Will o' the wisp, foxfire, swamp gas, whatever you want to call it. There are phenomena that exist that has been well documented, such as ball lightning, etc., that we don't understand. Lights in the sky. I've never seen a UFO, but I do know people who have. Some family members, with one instance that occurred sometime in the, I would presume, I heard this accounting several times when I was a child, but it would have been probably in the late 40s or early 50s, down in west central Louisiana, where multiple family members in two separate locations in the same area saw three large silver discs. And an aunt and uncle that lived up on the hill, so these things were emitting intense heat, and to the point that they both suffered some burns from the things, and said that it even ignited things around their house. My mother and father in the 1950s were at a drive-in theater, and they said that some object came and was traveling horizontally, basically in line with the highway in front of the theater, They said probably a couple of 100 feet off the ground that lit the entire area up like daytime. And I think I remember my mother showing me a newspaper clipping about it when I was a young kid. Uh, yeah, I mean, people see things. What they are, I don't know. Uh, I hear a lot of connection with these creatures, and there may well be. Um, Nobody knows what these things are. If they do, I'm sure they work for the government. Uh, I've heard them described as the Nephilim, and there is historical and biblical context for these creatures. More of it can be found in the Book of Enoch. Giants, read a lot about. Um, these creatures spawned among humans, um, humans and fallen angels, I guess. Best description. I mean, even the book of Genesis, it says in those days there were giants. I Part of my family, they were married into the family, but they were Native American back in the Sabine River bottoms. They were Choctaw descent that had migrated into that area to escape uh, European expansion into the Oklahoma Territory and to avoid the Trail of Tears. Uh, my uncle was the one who taught me how to track and hunt. He was full-blooded Choctaw and spent his entire life in the woods. He lived, worked. He was a logger, had a two-mule logging outfit and a little sawmill operation. Uh, his mother, woman, she lived to, I think, 107 years old. I used to talk to her. She was supposedly some kind of medicine. She told me tales about how these creatures. Well, she said that something to the effect that several tribes banded together a millennia ago and went to war with these creatures on the banks of the Mississippi River and pushed the remaining ones of them into an area of southern Arkansas, western Louisiana, and eastern Texas. And for centuries to their people, that was like a no man's land to go into. It's kind of taboo to go in that area hunting. Uh, they had a word for them. I can't remember how they pronounced the word. Now, I asked what it meant, and something basically like skunk people. That's what they call them. Uh, they seemed to know a lot about them, and they had no love for them whatsoever. That was just what I remember about it. When I was a small boy, and I used to go when I first started going into the woods hunting by myself. I was told by parents, grandparents, family members, you know, if you see one of these things, never shoot it. I said, only shoot it when you absolutely have to. I said, if you had to, shoot it in the face and reload as fast as you could because there's probably going to be another one jumping out of the bush. Uh, at that time, as a young boy, I really I'd seen deer, I'd seen squirrels, I saw rabbits, I saw possums, raccoons. At that point in my life, I'd never seen a wild man, and I wasn't overly concerned about that. But I think in later years, I came to understand. I think the reason that they said to shoot it in the face was because back then I was hunting generally with a single shot shotgun, and you shoot something in the face, especially a predator, there's a good chance you disabled its sense of sight, and potentially, if it's a significant enough wound to where you've inflicted damage upon uh, nasal passages or sinus cavity, you debilitated its sense of smell as well. So I think that was the theory in them telling me to shoot it in the face. But most of my family, as far as their perception of these things, was to leave them alone. Um, like I said, they didn't. You would overhear conversations between two adults making reference to these things, but it wasn't something that they generally sat around and talked about. But all of them pretty much felt like, this was just some another creature back in those river bottoms that was best left alone. Uh, uh, there's a lot of my mother had a saying, whenever something would puzzle me, I'd hear about something or see something, I'd be trying to figure it out. My mother had a saying she would always say, she said, "Well, son, let me tell you what, there are more things in this world than heaven and earth." And that's basically the adage I use to describe a lot of the phenomena that people observe. As far as smart as humans believe they are in this era of technology and daily advancements in science, we we have only begun to understand the world and universe in which we live in. Human beings on this planet are relative newcomers. There have been multiple periods of life that come and went on this planet before we came along. I think we are only beginning to understand the world around us. There are things that we experience in the course of our lives that leave us puzzled, especially when you get the age that I am. You know, you've seen a lot that you can't explain. And in the course of my lifetime, I'm sure a lot of this stuff will not be explained because we simply, as advanced as we are, do not have the understanding of it. I think you can have multiple phenomena exist in the same space and time, in the same plane of reality, and not be connected. Uh, I think it's a bit presumptuous and reaching to automatically assume if you see lights in the woods and you see a big hairy figure in the darkness, the two are related. They may or may not. I'm the kind of person that I remain skeptical about everything until I see some kind of data that supports that. Because if you start looking at, if you see a bunch of anomalies and you're trying to figure something out and you group them all into the same thing, you may go down too many rabbit holes looking for answers to any of those. And part of my career, I dealt a lot with critical failure analysis. And I would have staff that would be looking at recorded data prior to a failure and see a bunch of anomalies. And I would have to caution them about not trying to relate all of those anomalies to the failure itself, but look at each thing individually and see if you can actually establish some sort of association. Because if you group a whole bunch of things into one and start trying to analyze it from that perspective, you may totally miss what you are actually looking for, because it takes you in a whole nother direction. So I'm the kind of person that believes anything is possible in this world. I don't discount anything, nor am I really quick to believe anything just based on supposition. Kind of person, I always want to see data. I always want to see fact. But in conclusion to all that, there are a whole lot of strangeness out there that people observe that doesn't make any sense, and on the surface has no apparent explanation. Of course, our own government now has pretty much come out and acknowledged the existence of UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, as they put these days. So who knows? Anybody, like I said, anybody who actually does know probably works for the government, because there's no way that our government does not know these creatures exist, because there's too many accounts and incidences that has happened in and around and near our military installations. So for whatever reason, whether it be economic or maybe for some religious reasons, or any number of other potential possibilities, they don't want to acknowledge the existence of them. I'll say that. If you go into the woods and you're walking around the woods, just random woods, looking for these things, the odds of you encountering one are slim. These things not only see you, but hear you and smell you like long ways away. In my experience, for the most part, these things, they seem to want to know that you're around. if you're around where you are. I think that's for security reasons for themselves, but will mostly try to avoid you at all costs unless you're near an area where they're bedding or where they're hunting. I've had things thrown at me. One night I had a piece of broken green pine about 4 inches in diameter, maybe 20 inches long, come flying out of the woods. And if it hadn't hit the ground before it hit me and bounced into me, it probably would have fractured my leg. One occasion during the daytime, just out of the blue, a green pine cone. I'd had several pine cones just prior to that, and probably a 10-minute span prior to that, hit the ground near me. I was in pretty deep brush, and I couldn't tell what it was. But I got slapped in the face with a green pine cone that came flying horizontally out of the woods. It hit me in the face hard enough to where left me with a big bruise on my face, and I was bleeding like a stuck hog. I think when you get too close to, especially an area where they're bedding at, or an area where they've got a hunting blind, they'll try to run you off various ways. But just to walk in the woods wanting to see one, that's probably not going to happen. Like I said, in my experiences in the course of my life, it wasn't because I was looking for them. Simply because I was in the woods, in the deep woods, looking for the same thing they were looking for. And you do that enough times, eventually two predators stalking the same prey's paths will cross. And I believe that was, I think my first encounter was just a random encounter. But most of the others past that were associated with activities I was engaged in, stalking, tracking, studying game. I don't think of anything else that I might could add to that. They're out there, and in a lot of places, they're closer than you think. And I think if I had to suggest a way to see one, it wouldn't be by going off into the woods looking for one. It would be by getting into an area where you're pretty sure they're at and get close enough to them, and then get real small, real quiet, and real concealed. Because they will come looking for you. If you're real close to them and they can't see you, if they can smell you and hear, but can't see you or hear you, they'll move around looking for you. I've had that occur multiple times, and that is what created the situation that allowed me to see them multiple occasions. It wasn't because I was looking for them. It wasn't because they were out in the open. It's because I was very concealed, very quiet, and they were moving around trying to find me. Like I said, they're standing still in the cover of foliage by a tree in shadows. I don't care how observant you are and how hard you're looking. You're not going to see. They are just that aware of their surroundings. Of course, most predators senses are keyed on movement. Humans, though we've lost a lot of our primal instincts, we're still the same way. So we detect movement pretty well. You can get them to move around, you stand a better chance of being able to see one. That would be my advice to anybody that's, well, I'd have two pieces of advice there. Be careful for what you wish for. The first thing. And second of all, your best chance of finding them is not by looking for them, it's making them look for you, which they will do if you're close enough to them. I'm pretty well assuming it's for their own security is the reason why they actually want to see where you're at. They want to have eyes on for whatever reason. I think it's for their own security. But that's the best way to, quote unquote, I would say, use the term find one, but you're not going to find one most of the time. When people have random sightings, it's either because of road crossings or because somebody just, one of them just slipped up and people were able to approach them from downwind, or there was a lot of wind in the trees and they didn't hear you walking. I think if you encounter one under random circumstances, it's because they slipped up, or you were just, your movements were concealed by other noise, wind, etc. I mean, to me, I don't have the, I guess there's no shock value in these things for me because I was told about them from the time I was born. They're just another creature that's out there, but they are out there. And I probably in my lifetime won't ever know what they are. I've asked myself that question a lot of times. But I think a lot of people think that these things are, I've got one fairly well known researcher near me who thinks these things are the forest people and they are benevolent creatures of the forest. Whether these things have intentional malice toward humans or not, I've been a study of wildlife and nature all my life, and these things are apex predators. You have to understand something. Even within our own species, as refined and civilized as we like to think ourselves, there have been many documented incidences where humans have eaten humans when they get hungry enough. There's been cases where people have tried to eat their own arms when they're hungry enough. Even if these creatures do not specifically have intention to prey upon humans or have intentional malice toward humans, you can never, I don't believe you can think that any creature on the face of this planet would not be aggressive toward a human under certain circumstances. And these creatures, well, let me put it this way. If you're in the middle of the woods and one of these creatures decide they want to jump on you or even dine on you, you better have some kind of plan for that, because you cannot outrun these things. These things have a unique physiology, an incredibly long stride, and are very fluid in motion. I can tell you one thing, they can crash through brush that will stop a human being like a brick wall. Uh, I was always told from a child, never go off in the woods without a firearm. And I always recommend that to anybody going hiking or camping, because Bigfoot ain't the only thing in the woods. There are all kinds of predators. There are, where I'm at, we have every variety of rattlesnake you can imagine, at least two species of coral snakes, copperheads, water moccasins. Uh, there's bobcats, bear, coyotes, some wolves. There's a lot of things in the wilderness that could be a potential threat to a person. Regardless of personal opinion or perception of these creatures, even if you believe that these things are friendly forest giants that want to be besties with you, I would suggest that you know your way out of an area. At least if you're going off, first of all, if you're going off into the wilderness, have at least some wilderness experience or training or understanding, and carry a firearm. Like I said, Bigfoot ain't the only thing in the woods you have to worry about. Uh, I can't. I don't know of anything specifically. Like I said, over the years, I honestly cannot tell you how many times I've probably encountered these things. A couple have been pretty good visuals. I've seen them pretty well. Most of the time, it's like everybody else. It's a fleeting glimpse. When you see something move in the woods, you have to calculate how tall it is, how it's moving, what it looks like, and you can kind of eliminate species from there. When you see something that's 5 or 6 feet tall or taller, very large, and walking upright, I'm sorry, but in my experience in a lot of woods and a lot of the country, the only thing, you'll see a bear up on its hind legs for a little bit, but you're not going to see something moving through the woods like it's on snow skis, standing upright. These things can move, and and they can also move on all fours and move really quietly. Uh, they could probably crawl right up to you without you knowing.
Did you share all your ice sighting encounters, or was it just the one in 1972?
I, honestly, Gail, you're talking about a span of over 60 years. I mean, it's
Yeah, let's talk about them all. And
well, I mean, I've seen, I've had a couple of fairly good visuals. One was had stepped out at a trail behind. One I was actually, well, I think actually it was more than one.
okay, that would be the main focus of the podcast. So instead of just being like one here, one there, like tell me what you were doing that day. Like the state, was it in a
I
national
was coming,
forest?
I was coming out of the woods. It was, no, it wasn't a national forest. It was timber company land.
Was this in
Uh,
Louisiana?
this was in west central Louisiana.
Okay, so
Right, probably I'd say probably 10 miles from the Texas border. It was north. It was northwest of the city of Natchitoches, but it was south of Pleasant Hill. Anybody familiar with the area probably know where that area is at. I'd been back several miles in the woods, uh, hunting on a gas pipeline right away. I was coming up an old. It was just basically a trail overgrown. It was an old, either an old logging road or maybe a road that was used during pipeline construction or something, but it had been abandoned for decades and decades and pretty much grown over. But I heard something as I was walking out, and this was in the afternoon, but it was still plenty light. Uh, I was coming out of the woods actually, and something blanked me going the opposite direction. Uh, it's by the sound of it, maybe 10, 20 yards over in the woods off the trail. Sounded like either large hog or cow or something, but it was moving pretty fast. And after it stopped probably 20 or 30 feet behind me. When it stopped, I stopped. And this thing sprang out of the woods in the middle of the trail, looked at me, and screamed at me. Nothing. These things must have massive lung capacity because that vocalization, I think I felt it more than I heard it. And it like vibrated everything in my body. But I was standing there, and one thing you never do, you never run from a predator. It was startling, and I knew what it was when I saw it. I didn't move. I stood there. Of course, I had an M1 Garand in my hand. Had 8 rounds of alt 6 in it, so it stood there for a second. And I guess because I didn't turn and run, it turned and bounced off the other side of the trail down into a hardwood bottom. And I waited a few seconds, turned around and hurried my way on up out of those woods. Uh, I saw, I believe it was more than one, but I was looking across. I was up on a hill, and this was probably, it wasn't too far. This was in the Manning Zoology area. I was on a pipeline right of way on the opposite side of one, up on top of a, well, I wouldn't say a hill, but a high area where the pipeline dropped down. Waves had a little small little creek or runoff going across the bottom. This big berry patch. I know there was, because I'd been up and down that pipeline. I know in that area there was a lot of berry vines and stuff, and I could see. I can't say for sure, but I think this was more than one of them because the visuals I had when I had them, it looked like at least two different creatures. They were on the opposite side. They were about. I was in a tree line and downwind of them in a cedar thicket, and they were on the opposite side, kind of at the bottom of the draw. And over a span of several minutes, uh, got a pretty good glimpse of them as they through the vegetation right there at the edge of the pipeline right away. Like I said, most of the other encounters are just fleeting glimpses or something you hear. I've seen eye shine, I guess you would call it, out in the woods from the light of campfires and stuff, and heard things that I knew was something very large. And if you hunt and track enough, you pretty much can tell if you know what bipedal footsteps sound like as compared to quadrupedal. You can recognize the difference. Uh, you're talking about a lot of different experiences over. I mean, I started going into the woods by myself in the late 1960s, and that was my passion. Uh, Fishing, hunting, and camping. I've never been a sports junkie, never watched a lot of baseball, football, or anything like that. Any my leisure time I wanted to spend in the woods, either hunting, tracking, camping, or on the side of some river, bayou, or lake fishing. Uh, I've seen I've seen enough of these things to know that what I am seeing is not something else by simple process of elimination. Even your fleeting glimpses by process of elimination, you know that you're not looking at any other known type of wildlife, at least not on this continent anyway. Uh, I know a lot of people's experiences are traumatic, disturbing, and even life altering. But I guess when you've seen all manner of predators in your lifetime and you've grown up being told that something like this existed, that it wasn't fairy tale, wasn't myth or legend, that yeah, the wild man is out there. It's like deer, hogs, squirrels, rabbits, anything else. It's something that lives back there in those river bottoms. That was the perception I had growing up. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, or numerous family members talk about them, tell me they were out there, talk about times they've seen them, et cetera, et cetera. And at an early age, by 1972, I realized after my first encounter with these things that the wild man wasn't a feral human like Tarzan. It was something else. Being young and the only having been to the zoo and stuff and knew what monkeys and gorillas look like when I first saw these things. Like I said, it was from a distance. You know, when you're small, things seem a lot bigger, and distances seem a lot further. But probably 100 yards, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But it was good enough to tell that I was looking at something that looked like a monkey, big monkey. That's what my young brain associated what I was seeing as some type of primate. And then I learned soon after that, after a good scolding, that was not a monkey, and there were no monkeys in Louisiana. Have I ever felt alarmed or scared during some of these experiences? Yeah. There have been times that these are usually at night when I'm actually camping, and I've encountered or had experiences which I either knew or was pretty sure was related to these things. Yeah, there have been some times. Outside of having some things thrown at me, I can't say that these things I felt directly threatened by these creatures. But again, I know enough about wildlife and about predators to know that these are wild creatures, and you can't just automatically assume that these things will not hurt you. Because I believe that given the opportunity and the right circumstance, they will. But then one thing about it, where I differ from a lot of people I know who enjoy the wilderness, I never go in the woods without a firearm. I don't know where else to go or what to talk about. Do you have any questions or anything?
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting that your mother called them wild people and they're not just a monkey in the woods. And I would agree. It sounds like they already knew about them and they've had run ins with them in the past or know people who have. And that's terrifying. I know the area that you're talking about. There's been a lot of reports there that I've heard about, and especially on the channel. And I've even had a gentleman who served at what's it called, Fort Polk, and he was talking about entities and Sasquatch, and he showed me his credentials, and I don't know, what he described was kind of terrifying. And it seems like the government and the military know about these things. Obviously, not everyone, but there are individuals that are very aware of them.
Well, knowing this much about the military, anything that goes on in or near a base, the government makes it their business. Multiple agencies within the government makes it their business. And especially a facility like Barksdale Air Force Base in northwest Louisiana. That is home of the United States Air Force Global Strike Command, and where a large contingent of our B-52 nuclear bombers are based. There's been a lot of activity, and I've actually heard one incident told about on social media of a gentleman that was stationed at Barksdale. And I do know of other instances that have happened. There is a large wildlife management area surrounding that base. Goes off into the Bodcall uh, area and Lake Vistido area. And like I said, it's on the eastern bank of the Red River. Red River is a tributary that flows. It flows along the Texas-Oklahoma border uh, to around Texarkana area. The Sulphur River Basin drains into it. A lot of the tributaries. I mean, the area, the Boggy Creek area, Sulphur River Basin, around Falk, Arkansas, for example, drains into the Red River Basin. It flows down basically the western side of Louisiana until it gets about to the central, or toward the central part of the state, and then it starts veering off toward the Mississippi and the Chapelizod Basin. Yeah, there have been too many incidences around government installations for the government not to know about. There are very few things in life that I would say are a certainty, but given what I know about the government and especially security around the military installations, yeah, they know about it. Maybe in this new, under the current administration, under this new era of uh, disclosure, maybe we'll find out more about it. I don't know. But I do understand why people have the traumatic experiences they have. Because I can imagine if the first encounter I had was not scary to me because I was a child. I literally thought I found some big monkeys. But in later years, now I had some encounters, sightings of these things that if I had no previous knowledge of them would have scared the hell out of me. If I ran across what I've seen in the woods and did not have some idea that these things existed, that would be a very frightening, traumatic experience. And I can understand why a lot of people experience perhaps post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever from their encounters and why they are so traumatic. These things are out there. I've always been the person. I don't care whether you believe me or not. Really doesn't make any difference to me. Uh, never really, my reputation, professionally and as far as an outdoorsman is pretty well known. But uh, I think the reason that I'm speaking to you about this today is just because I've become more and more conscious lately of given given the expansion, human expansion into the wilderness. These things are closer than most people think. And you don't have to go on an expedition in the middle of the forest to find these things. As long as you have some habitat and enough game and water, there's a good chance that you do have these things near you. I think there's way more of them than people think they are. I mean, number of times that I have had some sort of encounter, if you use that word, uh, most of my encounters with these creatures, had I not had knowledge that these things are out there and their behavior and physical structure, most of them I would say would be just something I saw move in the woods. But being an outdoorsman and hunter, I know that there's nothing walking around on two legs in the woods, and nothing walking around in the woods that big. If I don't see just a flash of the back or head or shoulders of one of these things, by how large it is and the physics of its movement, it kind of narrows down the possibilities of what it is I just saw. Uh, and like I said, I think more people see these things than they're actually aware, or they've seen these things and are not actually aware that's what they saw. They just saw something. Most people are not used to going in the woods for the specific purpose of stalking and tracking game. You learn to recognize signs and you become aware of sounds you hear and what they're related to, or something you may see moving in the brush, what it most likely is, just out of experience. But when you see a creature that large, moving that fluidly, and most importantly, engaged in bipedal locomotion, in this part of the world, that kind of eliminates possibilities real quick. Like I said, bear will get up on their hind legs, and they will, if you can use the term, walk for short distances. I've never seen one run off and run on two legs breaking brush. And I've never seen in this part of the world, I've never seen a bear stand up that tall either. Uh, this is a pretty active area. I for years, probably for 50 years, I referred to, there's a corridor like the Ozark Mountains, southern Missouri, down into the like the Comanche River Valley, foothills, the Ouachita Mountains, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Arkansas, Louisiana, and Arkansas, Texas, and Texas, Louisiana borders, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. This is that area encompasses a vast amount of dense wilderness. More importantly, multiple watersheds, reservoirs, creeks, rivers, streams, bayous, all game stay close to two things predominantly, three things actually. They're going to stay close to their habitat, but they're going to also stay close to their food source and to water. And in that strip from southern Missouri down the Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas borders, it is resource rich for all forms of wildlife. The state motto of Louisiana used to be the sportsman's paradise, and that it is. I've been all over, but I've always came back to Louisiana because of my love for the outdoors. But that area that I described, that corridor, if you will, from southern Missouri down the Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, Texas borders, from the Ozarks to basically Sam Houston, Big Ticket area. I refer to that area for the I don't know, probably 50 years or more. I just call that Wild Man Alley because it's just a perfect environment for not only these things but for all manner of wildlife. And the interesting part about it is nowadays, because of urban and suburban expansion, you have subdivisions that are just adjacent to wilderness that is perfect habitat for all manner of creatures. And in a lot of areas in this part of the world now, it's not uncommon to see hogs, deer, raccoons, possums, and everything else in suburban neighborhoods, especially at night. This is a resource-rich area for all manner of wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned too in the emails about I don't know what it's called, the GCBRO. Did you want to talk about that on the podcast?
Well, one of the big organizations, I guess, in this area, it's an organization known as the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. They were the subject matter and focus of It was some cable networks reality show back in the early 2000s. I remember when they were running around with them called Killing Bigfoot. Uh, this this area is where a whole lot of them live, and a lot of their uh, operations, I guess you would say, have been based in the areas that I've described down the Texas-Louisiana border. Uh, I believe it was back in 2002, I believe, was in February. They claimed to have shot and wounded one, probably not more than 15 or 20 miles from where I'm sitting at right now. So, uh, but I know I've had encounters in the same area, and I know a lot of people who have. Uh, a person that I've heard talked about a lot on the internet was a guy that lived down 171 from me, named Mike Woolley. He had an encounter. Uh, Actually, his encounter took place down closer to the woods where my family was from. My mother's family was from along Sandine River. His encounter happened uh, down close to Zoohali, Louisiana. I think back in the 80s, which that's one of the people. I think his encounter was was seriously traumatic for him. Uh, but there's been a lot of documented activity in this area. Like I said, this is only, I mean, it's further than that. I mean, the highway that would take you to the area that I live in, you would have to go down Highway 71 from Texarkana through Fouke, Arkansas, into North Louisiana, and uh, right as you get to Shreveport, Louisiana proper, you would head south down Highway 170. Uh, but I'd say as a crow flies, where I'm at, somewhere between 55 and maybe 65 miles south of Fouke, Arkansas. What occurred in Fouke, Arkansas that really made, I guess, made well, what made Fouke what it is today was simply a movie that was made there. Uh, Before the movie was ever made, because of the area that I live in, it's not that far away. The incident that happened to the family that lived there off of 71 there by Fouke, that actually made the local news, television news, and in the newspapers at the time. Uh, I remember when that actually happened. Uh, I was in the early 1970s as well. But that kind of thing, that wasn't the first time that it happened. That's just something that I think because the Miller County sheriffs got involved in it, I think because it made the media, and by that time, uh, news and newspapers were uh, pretty pretty commonplace. So it gained a lot more attention than what it normally would have. But yeah, it was reported by uh, in my area a local. I think it would have been KTAL television network. I think they're based out of Texarkana, and a couple of the local Shreveport area uh, television stations. Their news departments reported on it, and I know I'd seen it written about. I think in the Shreveport Times and Shreveport Journal as well during at the time right after that occurred, long before the legend of Boggy Creek was ever made. But I think there was a time along this area there were lots of families that lived in the woods and and they'd been in those woods for generations. Like my mother's family, my mother's generation of her family was the first generation, I think, to start to venture out of that area. Uh, my mother, my grandfather had broken his back at one time, and my mother was from a fairly large family, and my mother left home probably 14 years old to go to work to help support the family. She ventured out of the woods into nearby cities to work, and a lot of the males in the family of her age, they spread out into the oil patch in uh, Texas. A lot of them ended up actually living and moving to West Texas and to New Mexico because they had jobs and careers based in the oil field industry. Um, but prior to that, those people were born, lived, worked, and died in the woods. And a lot of things were just common knowledge to people back then that actually lived in the woods. It's one thing to go visit the woods, but it's hard for most people, especially urban and suburban dwellers, to imagine what it would be like to live miles and miles and miles back in the woods. My grandparents' home, when I was growing up, they were so far back in the woods they didn't even have electricity. At night there was just kerosene lanterns. Uh, my family lived in sawmill board tin roof houses, had outhouses, and wells, and cisterns, and would would leave out of the woods only to go to the doctor or to go handle some business, or maybe once or twice a month to go up to the general store and pay your bill, or get some things, or go into town for bills and supplies or materials or whatever. Uh, most of them, most of them made their living off of logging, uh, sold logs for pulpwood, teepee poles. Some of them had small sawmills, cut lumber on demand for area residents, and uh, cut logs for cross ties, etc. But they spent their lives in the woods. Uh, I've talked to a lot of people that were amazed because I actually had my own firearm at 6 or 7 years old. That's just the way it was. And a lot of times for my mother's family, hunting wasn't a form of recreation. Uh, that was necessity because a lot of times, most of your meat came from that. I grew up on fried squirrels, rabbits, deer roasts, deer chili, deer sausage, ground deer meat. Uh, that was a large part of those people's diets. It wasn't something they just did for recreation. You took hunting very seriously and you tried to be as skillful as you could at it because a lot of your groceries came from that. And there were those that trapped for hides and stuff like that, pelts. Um, some of the family fished for a living. Um, it's just a different time, Miguel, than it was the times that I see now and have since the dawn of this century. Seem kind of alien to what I grew up in.
What other experiences would you like to share, or have you pretty much covered everything?
Miguel, honestly, there are things that I'm sure there's lots of things I don't even recall because of how long ago they were and the amount of significance they held on me. I mean, there are people I've seen lights in the woods. Everybody I know has seen lights in the woods. For example, I hear a lot of people talking about that. Some of these things, like I say, are naturally occurring phenomena. Things, I mean, they're called by a lot of names. Uh, Foxfire, swamp gas, wildebeest, various other things. But they're luminescent gases caused by uh, biodegrading material ground, methane gas that becomes phosphorescent or actually combusts in certain aspects. And there are some things that I've seen some things that I simply don't have an explanation for. Licensed with everybody I know. There's an area north of me, um, south of Shreveport, Louisiana. When I was a teenager, there was, well, I guess it was an urban legend sort of thing about a light that you would see along some railroad tracks in the woods in that area. And teenagers used to go hang out there at a T intersection in a roadway there, looking for these things. I think on occasion, I can't swear to it, but I did see some illumination back in that woods along those railroad tracks. But this was something that many, many people had observed. What it was, I have no idea. I have seen lights, unexplained lights that I could not identify as aircraft in the sky. And I think I mean, family experiences, family members had seen things. but nothing. I cannot say that anything that I've seen in the sky, night or day, that I could not identify was a quote unquote UFO or some kind of alien craft, because I did not have enough visual detail of it to be able to say that this was some sort of craft. And it could have been weather balloons, could be high flying flock. I don't know. It just looked like strange lights in the sky. Uh, there's a lot of phenomena that we can't explain that is out there. Because you experience multiple phenomena in the same area does not necessarily mean that this phenomena is all related. Doesn't disclude the possibility either, but it doesn't mean that it's directly associated. My mother, anytime I would experience something that I couldn't readily explain, my mother always had one saying. She'd look at me and said, "Son, well, I'll tell you what, there are more things in this world than heaven and earth." So uh, there's there are anomalies out there. There are things that exist in nature that I'm a fairly well educated person in multiple fields. Uh, I've been a professional most of my life. I've worked uh, salaried management for multiple Fortune 500 companies. But I've seen a lot of things that I can't explain. I have no explanation. And a lot of things, I'm the kind of person, I try to reason out most everything. But I've observed things that I cannot come up with any rational explanation or even hypothesis for. So, yeah, there are things out there, weird things that happen. And anybody who knows anything about the state in which I live in, especially the southern part of this state, where you have centuries old tales of creatures like the Dugaroo and Rougarou, uh, which, from what I gather, would basically be like Bigfoot and werewolf type creatures that have existed for centuries down there. When I was young and doing some uh, seismic work down in that part of the state, I've been in little general stores out in the middle of the swamps that actually sold boxes of silver bullets and 38 special, 45 Colt, 45 ACP, 30-30, and 30-06. I mean, they actually sold cast silver bullets, and people in those areas actually bought them because of those superstitions. Yeah, there's lots of weirdness out there that nobody can really explain. You just have to be careful when you observe this phenomena. Don't automatically group it all together as one common phenomenon. Don't disclude the possibility, but don't automatically assume because you see this all in the same time and space that it's related.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't solve one mystery with another, but at the same time, it is
That's
happening
exactly.
in the same place. So I don't think that's a
Well,
coincidence either. So it's hard to say.
well, the thing about it is, Miguel, we don't fully understand the world that we live in. We've made great technological advents, especially for whatever reason in the last couple of centuries. But we don't even really understand what we know. We are living, breathing creatures, but we also know that there's something else about us. Religious beliefs aside, it's safe to say that most everybody perceives that there's something else about their existence besides the body that it's inhabiting. We perceive that we as individuals have some sort of spirit, that there is some other force at play here besides just a biological organism existing. There is spiritual presence, force. All things around us in one way or another are related to energy. Every time you lift a finger, you move a muscle, have a thought, your heart beats, your lungs expand and contract, your digestive system functions. It's a result of electrical impulses. It's not just something that's happening. There is electrical energy being created in your brain that is traveling down neural pathways to muscles and making your body do what it does. So we know at very least there's bioelectrical activity occurring in all living species.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to discount the fact that that activity in itself is being charged or spurned or excited by other energy forces outside of our bodies. And that's when you can start to incorporate spirituality into that. But there are far more things about this world and even our own existence than we understand.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. And yeah, Lynn, I think that pretty well covers your experiences and encounters. And I feel like we could have did more of a deep dive on it, but it's all right. And we're kind of running out of time today. So yeah, I do appreciate you for taking the time to talk about the experiences that you had in the past and all the information you had regarding these creatures and kind of what you think's going on out there.
Well, I'll say this. They're out there. And if you're in the right area and employing the right techniques, you have a good chance of being able to have some kind of encounter with them. But your best bet is not by looking for them. It's by positioning yourself in an area where they feel driven, compelled, or inclined to look and try to locate you. Because what you are going to have the best chance of observing is motion. These things are masters at camouflage and concealment. And your best chance to see them is if they are in motion. That's about all I can tell you about that, Miguel.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And these things are very stealthy, and it's best to just position yourself in an area where they will approach you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Lynn, I'll keep in contact with you, and we can keep talking about the experiences that you've had and more about the information that you know that you didn't talk about on the podcast. But yeah, for today,
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand, and I do apologize, Miguel, but I've been in an area for decades now where there's a whole lot of quote unquote researchers, and I am not one of those. As a matter of fact, I stay clear of this genre for a long time for that specific reason. You're actually the first person that I've spoken in much detail about this to, and it's simply because in seeing your videos, you're not out there for the drama or the views. I'm a really good judge of character, and I see somebody that is genuinely looking for personal answers. That's why I felt compelled to reach out to you and just share with you what I do know, which is not a hell of a lot. And like I said, anybody who knows a whole lot about these creatures or know what they are, I can promise you they work for the government. But you seem very genuine in your quest, and you seem to be motivated by personal interest or personal curiosity. And I reached out to you based on that and just trying to offer what I had and knowledge I had, and hoping in hopes of helping you with your pursuit. I'm open to anything, but I will only say or believe what I've actually observed and have some basis for. You understand? It's not that I discount the possibility of anybody's theories. I can only base my opinion on what data I actually have or have observed. But anything is possible.
Yeah, that's the best thing to keep in mind is that anything is possible. And there's a lot of wild stories out there, but you just have to keep them in the back of your mind because it very well could happen to you.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Life is an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Lynn. Well, I'm going to let you go for now. And I want to say thank you for sharing your information. And it certainly helps. And I'll keep it in my mind when I'm out there in the woods, just researching whatever I can and just spending time out there as an outdoorsman.
Well, just enjoy yourself and take precautions, be careful, and remember this: there's more things than Bigfoot in the woods to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
just be prepared for whatever situation arises. But there's nothing better. The best feeling there is being in the woods with nature.
absolutely.
It gives you a connection to the world that you live in.
Yeah.
All righty, Miguel. Well, I appreciate the time, and I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, sir, and I wish you well in your quest and in your endeavors, and stay in touch. Enjoy the
Absolutely.
conversation, my friend.
Yeah, me too. And we'll talk more in the future, okay? Lynn's encounters aren't stories passed around a campfire. They're experiences rooted in decades of time spent in the woods. From being watched in the shadows to feeling a scream vibrate through his body, it leaves you wondering what's really out there in those swamps. Lynn did explain he's only had quick glimpses of these creatures, but I do wish he would have been more detailed. And that's what I'm looking for with these podcasts: the time, the date, the weather, the color of the creature, the height, what it did, if there was a smell, and anything else associated with the report. And yeah, I mean, essentially I'm looking for the report to be logged down. All that information is important, and I don't mind getting into theories of what I think they are, why science doesn't acknowledge it, the government, and religious scripture, which I do that myself. I will quote scripture and talk about like the Nephilim. There were giants in those days, the beasts of the field, and it's okay to make a quick mention of what we think it is, whether it's like swamp gas, foxfire, but I don't want to get into a long, drawn out conversation about the government, science, or religion. And I really do want to focus on the report in the future. Like I said, the weather, the time of year, the time of day, your feelings in the moment, what it looked like, how tall was it, the color of the creature, were its eyes round or almond shaped, were they black, were they white, did it have a conical shaped head? All those details are important because it builds a database for the report. But Lynn didn't do anything wrong. That's my fault, and I'm kind of beating myself up for not focusing more on just the encounters, just the experiences, and everything else is just a side note. But I felt like we focused more on the side notes rather than the report itself, so I take full blame on that. And yeah, it was definitely a long podcast, but unfortunately it took a long time to edit this video. We talked for over an hour before we even started the podcast, and it was almost 3 or 4 hours to edit this video, or it was a 3 or 4 hour long audio recording, and it took many hours to edit the video. So next time in the future, I'm going to do a better job at focusing on the report and keeping the caller on track as far as their experiences and the details. We want to stick to the facts, and everything else is something that we will talk about in the end, as far as what we think they are in science, religion, the government, etc. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening, and until the next one, you guys be safe out in the forest.